Good morning. Here we are at tea time again. And in honor of the couple of thousand Chinese students that we now have, or they may not all be Chinese, but they are taking this class in Chinese, put up by Shui Tang, the platform in China. I'm drinking my tea out of a Chinese mug, Chinese tea mug. And I welcome our students from China. Apparently, in the first week, students in China were particularly interested in the discussion of sun preference. And they commented that though they see sun preference or boy preference as a serious and tough issue, but they believe that in their country, this tradition, this belief is beginning to diminish, that girls are beginning to be valued more, and particularly as education spreads to girls and they begin to be considered more valuable to a family. So this is good news from our point of view. At the same time, as I say, they considered sun preference to be a serious, a tough issue. Our Chinese students also commented on the Beijing Declaration that came out of the United Nations Fourth Conference on Women, which was held, in fact, in China in Beijing, with a non-governmental version of it, or a companion conference being held in Huairou. And out of that United Nations Fourth Conference on Women came the Beijing Declaration. Chinese students commented on that, feeling that it was useful and interesting, but that it didn't have enough practical application in terms of practical suggestions for change and measurable suggestions for change. Well, we have to look for other documents to find those kinds of specific guidelines. It's a lot to expect from the United Nations, which attempts to produce documents and conventions that can be signed on to by many, many different countries. Anyway, it's delightful to have a couple of thousand students taking this course on Shui Tang X in China, along with our more than 6,000 students that have enrolled in our English version of the class. This tea time actually relates directly to week 3, in which we were talking about female genital mutilation and HIV and AIDS, two health issues that affect women and girls, young women and girls, at times when they are particularly vulnerable. And a number of people already have commented on our Piazza Forum on the issue of female genital mutilation. And in fact, I received a very interesting and useful message from somebody who wrote and has in fact put this on our forum. She says, in this lesson on adolescence, which covers FGM and HIV, I wonder if you would comment on the work of a couple of researchers who've done a great deal of research, specifically developing a method of restoring women's external genitals and the clitoris after experiencing female genital mutilation. Their work is groundbreaking, she says, and they have trained doctors in Africa and other countries to do the reparative surgery, but the cost is still high. She put her commentary and a couple of important references up on our Piazza Forum. Specifically, she put it in news updated from around the world thread on Piazza to facilitate this area of discussion. And this student is interested not only in my views about these issues, but in your views. And I would like to say that her message is exactly what we hoped for in this MOOC, in this online course. And that is that we would present materials that may be of interest to people, we hope, in an organized way. But students themselves would share their experiences about organizations that are doing transformative work, research, as in this case, that is helpful and useful for the topics. The student, she asks, what do you think, she or he asks, what do you think the implications are for women in countries where FGM is still a strong cultural practice? The implications for developing restorative surgery. What do I think are the implications? Frankly, I think that in some areas where female genital cutting mutilation is still deeply embedded in the society, that this kind of intervention will be met with a lot of opposition. And I think it'll be quite difficult for doctors and others to introduce it. At the same time, I think we know that because many, many women's groups and other groups, I believe, particularly in Africa, are so concerned about this issue that the World Health Organization and others believe that the tradition will fade away perhaps within the next generation or two. And so the possibility of having restorative surgery will be part of that process of moving to actually confront and deal with this serious issue. At the same time, I think that although, of course, it's a wonderful possible intervention or current intervention, at the same time, the focus of most groups will be on attempting to develop alternatives to this as a ritual. In a good number of countries, female genital cutting, mutilation, is seen as a ritual, a transition to marriage or to adulthood, and other rituals may be substituted, and in some countries they are being substituted for this ritual, the ritual of female genital cutting, which is not particularly healthy for young women. So this is a very hopeful suggestion, a hopeful information for us, and I hope that you'll look for this on the thread on Piazza. Other people wrote about what we can do about this. What can we do, whoever we are, from around the world? My experience with this particular issue and other cultural traditions that might come up against some of our thoughts about human rights or health, women's rights or health, is that it's most useful to work in collaboration with local groups in the areas where these traditions or these rituals are being practiced. There are women's groups, there are other groups. I happen to be somewhat familiar with the women's groups, but there are groups in all countries of women coming together to deal with issues that they consider harmful to women's health or rights. And my approach is always to try to partner and collaborate with local groups that know best about what the problems are and what the solutions may be. So that's my general message when people ask me, what can I do? One thing that, of course, people can do if they don't happen to be in that particular region directly concerned with the issue is support organizations that are working there. The person went on to ask, what is the best way to fund and facilitate these surgeries if governments in general are not receptive to clinics being established in their countries? And again, I would say perhaps the best way to deal with that is to support groups that in fact are delivering services, and there are many around the world that are delivering services. Some of them we have linked to on this website. Well, time is going by, so let me move on to the second issue that we highlighted this week, which is HIV and AIDS. And I hope you watched the videos of Gene Richardson discussing his research and his approach to these issues. Incidentally, we did link to a very recent article by Gene and others who wrote about their research in South Africa relating gender inequality and the prevalence of HIV. It's really groundbreaking in the sense of attempting to actually measure change in terms of gender inequality. He raised in one of his short videos the question of structural violence, essentially looking at those variables, those situations that affect women and girls and others in society, whether it may be education or interventions, dealing with structural violence, that is the basic violence that is expressed in discrimination against and the demeaning of women. And he commented on how in some discussions, in conferences, he's observed that the biomedical approach, that is a pill, a surgery, a something, to intervene and make a difference with a problem, tends to dominate the discussion, and that social interventions such as increasing education, providing women and girls with the tools to feel more empowered, to be more skilled, whatever, are not always able to surface as publicly and as intensely as the biomedical interventions. And this is a very interesting question, I think, especially as we all, wherever we may be, might be participating in meetings that are actually raising questions about how interventions can happen. Obviously, biomedical interventions are very important, and we certainly don't want to ignore them. And we want them available to people and so on. But at the same time, we don't want to lose sight of the tremendous importance of turning around discrimination and against women and others, and the demeaning of certain populations. So I think Gene raises a very important question when he discusses structural violence, and we might want to keep it in mind as we move forward through the next weeks. Let me have another sip of my tea from my Chinese cup, and end this tea time by reminding you that the Piazza Forums are lively and marvelous in terms of raising questions and providing resources that many of you will have, and we can give more publicity to by putting them on our online course, our MOOC. I do want to say that many of the people who are taking this course are highly qualified with lots of information and resources that they very thankfully are sharing with us, and that is terrific. At the same time, I want to say that there are many students taking this course that aren't familiar with these issues, that may be young. There was a person writing on the forum the other day who's in high school, and I want to encourage all of you to feel free to ask your questions, to participate fully in this online course, even if you don't feel that you're as qualified as some of the other students that are participating. That's wonderful. We're having interchanges with people who have had very many different experiences, and we can all learn from each other. So I look forward to seeing you next week at tea time, and in the meantime, enjoy the resources, enjoy the interaction on the forums. Bye.